I'm gonna start the recording and I'm gonna admit all now.
Okay, so we are.
Yep.
Wow. It's a full room.
The Zoom where it happens.
Jeez.
It's wonderful to see everybody. Shonda, Chris, Ahmed, Ali, how are you? Jay, your great work at All Homes. Savlon, how's the baby? Regina. This is like romper room. I see Barbara. I see Andreas, Building Council, Liz Ortega. We've got labor in the room. I see Ari and Benny, John Brower. It's nice to have you. Lydia from the A's, Derek Johnson. I want my chicken and waffles. Maria from Lucas. Darlene. You've been working so hard and beautifully. Ryan. Greg Miner with a very cute friend there on your left. Mr. Ogilvy from Spur, hello. Lizandra from our workforce, Eleanor. Josh Simon from Ebaldsey, hello. Jennifer, Tam, and Nina, hey, how's it going?
How are you doing?
I'm good, I'm good.
You good? I see you stepping. You got to step and repeat back there. That's what's up.
Don't tell anybody, but this is my living room.
That's what's up. All right, everybody be well. Bye.
Bye. All right, I'm gonna wait for Kelly or Alexa to tell me when I'm allowed to start, when you think we've got a critical mass on, but this is definitely Stephen Bader. Good to see you. All your great regional work.
Hi, Mayor. This is Alexa. I think we are ready to start whenever you are. We have a full house.
Well, the fullness of this house, or the Zoom where it happens, as they say, is just a testament to everyone's love for the town. I don't need to be the 100th person to tell you this week that we are in unprecedented times. But Oakland shows up in its Oakland fashion, and that is with tenacity, with resilience, and a deep commitment to equity and justice, and a desire to know that we will be better together. So I know that you are all on the front lines of this economic devastation that is kind of the sister to the health devastation that COVID-19 has been causing in Oakland, the Bay Area, and indeed the world. The economic impact in Oakland has been severe. I mean, we've gone from, on average, having about 300 unemployment claims a week to more than 12,000. Just devastating when you think about the impact on our workers, our small businesses that people have poured their lifetimes into. It is somewhat grim. And the city of Oakland is not untouched by this. You may have heard that we're in the process right now. In fact, I have to do it by the end of this week, closing a $122 million funding gap in our own city budget. So even government is not a stranger to the economic impacts. I am, however, very hopeful because of the people in this Zoom room, and in particular, my co-chair, who has said he doesn't want to share words this morning, and I'll respect that. But one of the most beautiful human beings I know, and that is our Vice Mayor, Larry Reed, who also serves as the chair of the city's Community and Economic Development Committee. So on behalf of both of us, welcome. Someone is saying they cannot hear. Are other people hearing me okay? Do I need to? Okay, I will try and put my outside voice on more. You should know that Oakland's crisis response has been swift and significant. You're going to hear more later from Jose Corona in his new role with Eat, Learn, Play, and the amazing partnerships that we have wrought with our local restaurants to make sure that our most vulnerable are still eating. We have stood up one of the first COVID-19 racial disparities task forces to really look at the health impacts by race, where we know that in Alameda County, African Americans are dying at twice the rate of any other group. Our Latinos are contracting COVID at 3 times the rate of our white population. And so know that some brilliant minds have come together and are working on the health disparities. And as we stand up this council to advise us as we move into our economic recovery, we know that because of Oakland's commitment to equity and ending racial and gender disparities, that is going to be part of our work and our focus, because we do have an opportunity to come back better than we were before. And that is why we're so excited to be in partnership with each and every one of you today. So the purpose of this council is to identify strategies for an equitable economic reopening and recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. And this work will be grounded in the principle that equity is the best economic model. And we are very proud to be the home of PolicyLink that really has done so much to lead this message and this work across the country. So we will be doing 2 things. The immediate short-term recommendations to help Oakland businesses reopen quickly and safely. And that is safe for your employees, safe for your customers, safe for our community. And also to continue to connect Oaklanders with good jobs, living wage jobs. We also want to think about longer term ideas for how Oakland can rebuild its economy in a way that does not perpetuate the past inequities, the insecurities for our workers and our smallest businesses, the past inequities in wealth and earning potential that we've seen for many, many decades. That is also our opportunity for the long run. So again, know that we both have this immediate work in front of us, but always with this bigger, longer term goal in mind. We invite you all to be truly a part of what is going to need to be a working council. We can't all just have meetings. We've got to do the work in between if we're going to really realize the kind of impacts that we believe this council is capable of. And so you're going to have an opportunity today to think about how you want to engage more deeply in the issues that matter most to you. And we have a lot of people on this Zoom today, but let us be clear, you are going to be able to engage other people. Other people are going to want to get involved in this work, but you are our #1 ambassadors and thought partners, just because we know that the full population of people that want to engage is vast and almost unmanageable. And so that's why we are starting with you. Each one of you was very carefully and lovingly selected. We have tremendous respect for each and every person on this call, and many people who aren't on this call. Again, we had to cut it off somewhere. It is a very large group, but that's why we know it's going to accomplish great things. And before I hand it over to one of our facilitators and our kind of partner conveners, I really want to thank some of the people that have been working so hard just to even get to today and are so committed to this work overall. First of all, my Vice Mayor, Larry Reed, for his leadership on the City Council for all things community and economic development. Jose Corona from Eat, Learn, Play, formerly of the mayor's office, and before that, we all remember him with Inner City Advisors and Fund Good Jobs. He has been very critical to the planning and structure of this council and is serving as one of our partners to the chairs. Barbara Leslie from the Oakland Chamber. James Head, who had a last minute medical emergency, nothing serious, he's getting it taken care of, but he is one of our conveners, along with Micah Weinberg from California Forward. And of course, many of you know James Head is the head of the East Bay Community Foundation. And then I also want to recognize our data and research support team. And that is Darcel, Professor Dr. Darcel Laher with Mills College, and Jeff Belisario at the Bay Area Council's Economic Institute. Amazing partners. And it's not on my list of people to thank, probably because she wrote this, but the staff at the City of Oakland has just been working 24/7, and I mean 24/7. Alexa Jeffress, our Director of Economic Development, has been a godsend. Betsy Lake, who is one of our Deputy City Administrators over Economic Development and Major Projects. And then Kelly Kahn, who has half a foot in the mayor's office and the rest of her body in economic development, that has just been an incredible liaison, particularly to the creative community, but to all things economic development. And with that introduction, and again, acknowledging my partner, Vice Mayor Reed, I want to turn it over to Jose Corona to kick us off. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Great to see you and all of you, all 71 of you on this call. I don't know what you've been doing, but I've been flipping through the 3 pages that are here, and just seeing everybody's face just brings a lot of warmth to my heart personally, but also just, and actually, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit teary-eyed. I haven't seen many of you in person. I haven't been able to reach out and give you a hug. You all know that I'm a hugger. So it's hard. It's hard to see your faces and not being able to give you an embrace, which I would do in a second to each and all of you on this call who I know well. I just feel honored to be part of this. You know, I took on a new role last November, but as you can see, I didn't go far, and the work of this council is something that's very near and dear to my heart. So I wanted to just really lead and kind of set the agenda for what we're about to do, not only today, but over the next 4 months. And to some of you, especially those of you that are business owners, 4 months seems like an eternity. And I get that. So the first staple that, and first message that I want to send to all of you is that we're here to, I know all of you, and all of you in some way or form is a public servant. You know, you're in this because you want to do good, you want to help Oakland, you want to help its community, and you're doing it in different capacities. From the public sector, from the private sector, from philanthropy, from being a business owner. So I know that each of you is here for the right reason. Your heart is in the right place and you want to do good. But I also want you to understand that this is, like the mayor said, these are dire times. And I want you to understand the gravity of the situation of what our business community is going through right now. The urgency is, like I said, 4 months sounds like a lot. So as we embark in this work, I really want us to remember that this is urgent work, that we need to be thinking about tomorrow. After we get off this call today, what are we going to do tomorrow to make sure that we are making headway and taking the right steps to make sure that we are, as the mayor said, on a path to opening safely and in a manner that is going to be looking at the long-term equitable economic development future of our city. So yes, there's a long-term view, but I want you to understand the urgency of this work is about tomorrow. In this work that I'm doing right now with the World Central Kitchen, it allows me to still be able to talk with a lot of restaurant owners right now. And I just can't tell you how heartbreaking it is of the stories that I hear from everybody of how much everybody is hurting. And this is not just restaurants. It's not unique to them. All business is hurting, but especially small business, and especially those that are women-owned, people of color. So I get that. So we want to recognize that. We're also here, yes, because we represent a broad stakeholder group. You all were selected, and there was, we could have made this a 100,000 people Zoom call, because everybody here, there's people that contribute, but we have to start somewhere. And this was our best attempt to start at a place where we feel we can make some headway. The other thing that I want to make sure that everybody really understands is that, while all of us are here in it for the right reason, and it's about trust and relationship, we got to approach this with a sense of humility. We all are in our own way doing great work in our community, and I can attest to each and every one of you. And at the same time, we have to be in this process better listeners than talkers. Before really jumping into the solutions and thinking of what we think the community needs or what businesses need, we really got to spend a lot of time, as Michael Bush, who you'll hear from in a little bit, talks about the +2 listening. How are we listening with a willingness for our own agenda, our own assumptions to be altered? Because at the end of the day, it's the people that are closest to the problem, that are closest to the solution, as Darlene Flynn always says from our Department of Race and Equity. It's those folks that we need to be listening to. So our task here as a council is to really raise those voices, bring them to this body of work, and really start from that place where we're listening to the people that are most affected, because they have the best ideas, and we have to be humble about that. It's not about us, it's about who we're going to be helping. So I want to transition to the agenda, and we have can we switch to the next slide? So as the mayor said, she introduced many of these folks that are on the agenda. In a minute, I'll introduce Michael Bush, who will kick us off. But we'll do everything from the keynote address from Michael, who's going to say the framing of, he's a business owner in Oakland, longtime advocate of the small business community. We're going to jump into the kind of framing the data landscape with Darcel and Jeff. And then Micah is going to take us, and Micah and Marissa are going to take us through kind of a discussion around how we want to structure this and the working groups that we want to create about this. And this is the time for you to really raise your hand, however you raise your hand on a Zoom call, and really speak up, because we want to hear your ideas too. It's not just about us as co-facilitators and co-chairs. We want to hear your ideas, because I know all of you have good ideas too. And then we're going to close it off with Michael McAfee, which is going to really close off on a call to action and really talk about next steps. Next slide. So this is the convening team. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. We have the co-chairs. Thank you again, Mayor Schaaf and Council Member and Vice Mayor Larry Reed for convening this. This is an important time, urgent time. And we're just happy that you and the city of Oakland is doing this. And we're just happy to be of service here. Next slide. Again, thanks again to all the city staff that's involved in this. You know, this work is not just about, you know, the mayor and the vice mayor alone. It takes a whole team effort to get this work done. So we have everything from the city administrator's office, the mayor's office, the Department of Race and Equity, Economic and Workforce Development, Planning and Building, Transportation, every department, and I know there's others out there, every department that touches how a business is run and will open safely and in an economic secure way. We want to integrate that voice. So I want to thank everybody who's on the call right now from the city staff, because you know, we couldn't have done this without you. Next slide. And then there's the rest of you. That, you know, you can again scroll through the pictures and see everybody's faces. But we try to be very thoughtful and have a broad representation by geography and by sector. So we think we did an okay job in selecting folks that represent the stakeholder groups, the geography that we all want to touch. And again, it's not all encompassing of who's out there that can provide input. Our job is to go back to the stakeholder group that we represent and get additional voices. But again, we had to start somewhere, and we're just so thrilled that all the names that you see here and in the next slide are people that are been in the work. You know, they understand this work. You've been in this work, and you know, we really are looking for your expertise. And again, we want to be listeners and really hear from you of what your recommendations are, as we also listen to our end user, which are the business owners. So now, you know, as I think about when the mayor and Alexa asked me to help with this council, and we were thinking about who can help us kick off this council in the best way, I always remember the first person that always came to mind without skipping a beat. The first person that came to mind was Michael Bush. Many of you know him, and many of you know of him. From Oakland, raised here, entrepreneur, has started a lot of businesses, created a ton of jobs. I first met him when I was CEO of ICA Fund Good Jobs. He actually taught at Mills College and became the entrepreneurship professor for our, not only for ICA clients, but for everyone that wanted to be and think about what it means to be an entrepreneur. Michael Bush was there to really support and be an advisor, a mentor, and a teacher to many of us. And the reason why I thought about him to kick us off is not because I just respect him and he's a good friend and I like him as a person. He's a good human being. He cares about Oakland. He cares about the small business community. He cares about all business community and wants to ensure that all businesses are creating a great working place for all employees. And someone who taught me that the most complex problems are solved when you make them bigger. And he certainly knows how to make problems bigger, but it's always about in service of how do we get the urgency and get to and solve the problems that we want to solve. Because if we think small and want to solve the issues step by step, we're not going to get far. I think it's about how do you have that bold leadership, the bold vision about solving big complex problems, but starting with the people that actually make our community work, which are the small businesses in our community. So without further ado, I want to introduce Michael Bush, currently the CEO of the Great Place to Work, but again, a mentor, teacher, and friend to all of us. Michael.
Thank you very much, Jose. And if I could be granted permission to share my screen.
You should have it, Michael.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll see how this works. Can you see my screen?
We still just see you.
No.
Okay. How about now?
Still just you.
No.
Okay. How
There
about
we
now?
go.
There you go.
Thumbs
We can
up.
see it.
Great, excellent. All right, so you see a slide with a big Oakland on it?
Yep.
Good, we're ready to go. Thanks very much, Jose and Mayor Schaaf and Vice Mayor Reed and everybody else. A lot of good faces. As Jose said, I was born in Oakland, still live in Oakland, been here a long time. And so what I'm really gonna focus on are small businesses, particularly those who are the job creators. So this is the part that I think I can offer some ideas and some urgency, and also I've got to propose, make a recommendation around something that I think would be helpful to them. And yes, I'm a business owner in Oakland. My offices are at 1999 Harrison, where I've got about 100 people, and I'm paying a ton of money for nothing, month in, month out now. So I know the feeling. Here's really the situation. That there are 4 different types of small businesses, and this is just the life cycle of a business, of any business. Are you able to see that graphic okay?
Yes.
All right, so thank you. So the businesses, you know, I'll call them businesses in group A, are ones that are just getting started, and those are businesses that probably opened within the last 12 to 14 months. And they're about to go through a period of time where they need investment in order to start heading towards positive cash flow and profitability. And then there are businesses that are a little further along, but haven't quite got around the corner in terms of having positive cash flow. And there's a lot of those businesses, you know, in every major city, certainly in Oakland as well. And they're working hard, trying to get to have positive cash flow and profitability. And then there's the businesses in group C that actually have positive cash flow if you look at the money that comes in and out of the business every month, but it doesn't really feel like it because they have debt obligations based on bank loans or investors that they've said they're gonna owe money to. And then we have businesses in category D that are doing fine. So that's the situation. Anytime I work with any business, it's about identifying where are they on this curve. Sorry, I've got okay. So basically, the businesses that are in a situation where they are struggling and they haven't gotten to this point are the ones that are in the most trouble, and businesses that are sustainable, profitable, and cash flow. The situation is in January 2020, that might have been true for them. So in January 2020, before the virus hit, we had businesses in categories A and B that were struggling. And then category C, still not out of the woods yet, but at least positive cash flow. And then category D, where they were actually doing pretty well. Well, the situation right now is that the category A and B businesses are probably gone. They're probably gone at this point. They may not feel like they're gone, but if you look at the economics and you look at their income statement and the likelihood of what's about to come, it's likely that they're gone. So I'm not trying to be pessimistic here. I'm just talking about the reality of running a small business. And if you were in tough shape in January, you're probably, your livelihood is severely threatened as we look forward, based on a few things I'm going to mention, and I'm sure everybody is actually aware of. The other thing that's happened is businesses that were doing well in January have slid down into the valley. So they were doing well in January. They were looking forward to having, you know, a great coffee business, restaurant business, et cetera, and waiting to benefit from the thriving parts of Oakland during the bull market. And now they have slid. So they've gone from being above the line to being below the line. And I believe from my conversations with people on this screen, as well as in the community, this is the situation for most businesses. There's nobody saying, oh no, it's great, it's gonna be fine. They're saying that I've slid into the valley and into a situation where the cash flow is not existent. They still have debts and obligation, so their future is threatened. So I think the focus really is to focus on businesses C and D. Not that we shouldn't do anything for businesses A and B, but I feel like when things are urgent, and I think we're in an urgent situation, which is, I'm pretty sure for most businesses, they can't wait 4 months. I don't know a business that can do that. So I just don't, it's just not mathematically possible. So it's really what can be done in a very short period of time to help the businesses that can be helped, and every business can't be helped because the damage is just frankly too great. So one of the things we know, I'm sure we're going to hear about, is when we reopen, when this happens. If you look at the amount of disposable income that customers will have to spend, it'll be 20% of what it was in January 2020. So if you have a business that was making $5,000 a month in January, you're going to have a business when things reopen that'll make $1,000 a month. And that's an optimistic outlook. And that's just because people have lost jobs or are worried about their job. So they're holding on to their money, which they ought to do. So the smart person right now is trying not to spend anything. That's going to affect every business that opens up. So when the business opens up, it's going to be not very robust. Knowing this fact, also knowing about variable cost, which is labor and raw materials, they can be managed by the business owners who are in C and D categories who have slid down. The Tanya Hollands know what to do. There are people who know what to do around how to hustle and manage variable cost. They can do that through furloughing, laying people off, ordering less, shrinking the menu, shrinking your service or product offering. Small business people in Oakland in particular are magicians, and they know how to do this. They've been doing this. So I'm confident they can do it. Here's the thing they can't do anything about. Their fixed costs. This is what's going to crush them in the months to come. It will be the rent and lease payments. So for businesses that are going to reopen, this will be the thing they can't do anything about. And by the way, rent and leases are priced based on January of 2020. That's the problem. Anybody who doesn't think rent and lease prices are going to drop significantly over the next 3 years, I want to know what you're drinking. Because businesses around the world, I run businesses in 98 countries. They have totally figured out going forward is going to be different. And you don't need as much office space as you think that you need. And I'm open in Denmark, China, Norway. Everybody is using half the office space, and we'll be doing that for the next 12 to 18 months. So the idea of, oh, we're going to go back into the office and work the way we used to work, it's not going to happen. Because it's not going to happen from a mental health and physical health point of view. It's not going to happen from an economic point of view, because people have figured out, oh, there's another way to do business than putting people in physical spaces together, including people running call centers, by the way. They've been totally decentralized, something that people thought could never happen. So in terms of this fixed cost issue, I have an idea, which is for businesses that are in that C and D category that have fallen down into the valley. If you take their rent payments from March 2020 to March 2021, you take that amount of money and you cut it in half, is what I think needs to happen. Sorry, there we go. So the prior slide, I don't know how to go back. Oh, there we go. So take that amount that's owed from March 2020 to 2021, cut it in half. That's step 2. Next, divide that number by 24. And then that amount needs to be added to the current lease that needs 2 years added to it. So this is basically landlords financing keeping these businesses in business, because if they don't, they're going out of business. So it's an economic decision, I think, that's pretty clear. So it's basically take the amount, cut it in half, and pay it 2 years added to the lease. So you might be wondering, why would a landlord do that? If a landlord does this, they're going to do far better than if they don't, because they are getting a lease or keeping a lease at today's pricing, which is going to plummet in 2022 and 2023. So they're actually getting a great deal with this deal if they are willing to finance and free businesses up. Because if you take a small business and you eliminate the rent or the lease payment, that business has room to operate. It has what it needs to operate and to make decisions and to adjust the way it does business. It has capital as long as it doesn't have to pay for space that's going to yield very little return for the rest of 2020. So I think that there, from now until March of 2021, no rent or lease payments under this arrangement, so that businesses can use that money. Every business I know would know how to use this money in order to stay in business in a world where when they open, not many people are coming in. It's going to take a while before people get confident. So I believe it benefits landlords. I believe that landlords, so maybe some on the screen, I've talked to plenty of them, including mine. Pretty much the mindset is, oh, Michael, everything's going to go back and it's going to be just as great as it was in January. I just don't think that's going to happen. It is what they believe, because I think they need to believe that. Reality will set in, those rates are going to soften, and this is actually a good maneuver and a reward for landlords who are willing to finance small businesses today by not having them pay rent through March of 2021, and then taking that amount, cutting it in half, and adding it on to a couple of years to extend the lease. And that will enable businesses C and D that fall down in the valley, which they're in right now. They're in the valley right now. It'll enable those businesses to recover to January 2020 levels. January 2020 levels, they can probably get back to those levels in 2024. It's going to take 4 years to recover. If you're talking to a Hyatt or a Hilton, they'll all tell you that it's 5 to 7 years for them to recover. For any business that's going through what businesses are going through now, including mine, it's going to take 3 to 4 years to recover. There's no way around it. So it's going to take time, and they're going to need the capital to do it. And then the final point is, I seriously, I'm not being alarmist. I have nothing to do other than to relate. I could back all of this information up with the data. In 5 months from now, if a business opens, let's say a business opens in 30 days. The next couple of months, there's going to be very little business. And by the way, they still have the debt from the past. So it looks like they're in business. That's what it looks. Oh, they've reopened. It looks like they're in business. They're actually going out of business if some relief doesn't come. So businesses are different. I'm mainly talking about the businesses who employ people, therefore they have a retail space or an office space, and they're not venture backed or private equity backed or anything like that. If you got great banking support, fantastic and great. Most of the businesses in our community don't have those things. They weren't able to get the PPP loan or anything like that. Those are the businesses that I'm talking about in making these points. So I think that the action step is to find ways of communicating with landlords with the backing of the city, the philanthropic community, influential business owners, to say, now is the time for you to support your city. Now is the time for you to support your city. And what the city needs now is for you to keep these businesses in business. And by the way, you're going to get your money. Nobody's asking you for philanthropy. You're going to get your money, but you're going to need to extend the lease rate and get it later. You're going to have to bet on these businesses, because if you don't, they're going to be gone. And there's not going to be a long line of people for that space. This is an exceptional deal for landlords to do what I'm describing. It's an exceptional financial deal. They'll deny it today, but they'll come to it in a few months. And I think try to constructively talk with them about something they could do positive for the city and still make money. This is it.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Really creative and urgent thinking. And that is a terrific kickoff to what we're going to have to do here. Because there's been a lot of focus on whether businesses can reopen and like the push and pull, but whether a business theoretically could reopen does not actually matter if it financially cannot reopen. So thank you for grounding us, Michael, in the reality that a lot of businesses are facing. I'm Michael Weinberg. I'm the CEO of California Forward. I have been asked to be one of the co-facilitators for today. And I was already extremely honored and honestly a little bit nervous in doing this. And then I found out this morning that I have to play the role of both Michael Weinberg and James Head. And for those of you who know James Head, which I think is most everybody, those are not shoes that I can fill, but I will do my best and take you through the rest of the agenda. Just quickly, California Forward is a movement to make the California's economy and government work for everyone. The leaders of our California Stewardship Network, who are triple bottom line leaders from across the state, are running many similar state, local and regional efforts like this. And so I'm gonna try to connect these with the other efforts around the state. And one of the things that the best efforts will have is great research. And so I'm gonna turn it over now to Jeff Belisario, who is the Executive Director of the Bay Area Council Economic Institute. And he, along with Professor Darcel Lar, will be just landscaping for you some of the key data that should inform this process. It's going to be a lot of stuff. It's going to be very quick. We will have the ability to revisit it in much greater detail later on. As was mentioned earlier, this is just a kickoff for this group. So, please use the chat function to ask questions to the presenters or to the city staff, but there will be a lot of work for people to do. You'll be hearing about in the very next part of the agenda where Marissa Raya, who is actually the lead for this entire project, will be talking more about the work groups. So we'll get to that in just a little bit, but I would like to hand it over to my friend Jeff to go through some of the data that will inform this process.
Thanks, Micah. Can we get the slides back up? Perfect. So my name is Jeff Belisario. I lead the Bay Area Council Economic Institute. We're a regional think tank. And really what I want to do is just provide a very high-level overview of some of the numbers and provide context for the conversation we're about to have here. So you head back to the previous slide, actually. So this is and you've heard this, we're in unprecedented time. This is literally the definition of we're off the charts and not in a good way. So this is California unemployment claims in the last 8 weeks totaling 4.2 million. That's 21% of the state's labor force. A little bit of context, back in the last recession, it took us 56 weeks to get to that level of job loss. So again, things happening very rapidly here in the last 2 months. Next slide, please. And this is rapid fire. I think we're able to share these slides, so lightning round in economics here. Here's the city of Oakland, similar situation, 22.4% of the labor force filing for unemployment within the last 7 weeks. So a little bit higher number here. And on that orange bar there, that's gig workers, contractors, the self-employed that were able to file in the state of California just in early May here. So we're watching that number closely to see how that impacts different parts of the Bay Area. But again, big numbers here, 48,000, 22.4% of the labor force within the city of Oakland. Next slide. So one of the key things that we're looking at, and we look at the unemployment numbers, we'll know more on Friday from the state when the April numbers come out. But looking back at previous recessions, we've been tracking labor force participation very closely. And you can't see here, there's a couple of gray bars in previous recessions. But if you look back at 2000, 2001, labor force participation dropped, it never came back. If you look back to 2007 to 2010, a big drop there, and we never came back. With all the economic growth we had, the number of people and the percentages participating in the labor force never came back to those previous highs. And then within the city of Oakland, I'm showing that the numbers we've got when we look at between race and ethnicity groups, we're going into this crisis not at the same level. You look at a quarter of the white population not in the labor force, 1/3 of the black population not in the labor force. So going into this crisis, we're not set up in a way to really come out of it in an equal way. So something we'll be watching very closely there. Next slide, please. The other thing we wanted to look at was going back to the previous recession, what could we learn from that? And I think one of the big takeaways for me, the last recession hurt for everyone across all industries, across all business sizes. What I actually thought I would see is that maybe small businesses were hurt a little bit more than large businesses. That wasn't the case in terms of total employment here on the right side of the chart. And this is not to say that the recession that we're in or heading into right now will have any winners from it, but I think we're looking at something a little bit different. You can have the next slide here as I tease the next slide. We're already seeing, when you look at the state, and this is the state of California here, in terms of its job losses, lots of concentration in just a few sectors. And again, no sector is immune. You head to the bottom, you look at professional services, information, tech, they're losing jobs too. But clearly at the top, restaurants, healthcare workers, specifically outpatient services, dentist's office, physical therapy, construction, and then arts and entertainment all at the top of this list. Next slide, please. So that's kind of what we've lost in the state. McKinsey's looked at Alameda County. So this is sorted by jobs at risk. So this is looking a little bit longer term and looking at the jobs we might lose within the economy here. So the top three, again, food service, arts and entertainment, personal services in terms of numbers. But McKinsey looks at 92% of all restaurant jobs being at risk. That doesn't mean we're going to lose all of them. These are jobs that are largely in the service industry, require person-to-person contact, and are jobs that may not come back in the future. Next slide, please. And then the other thing that the McKinsey analysis looked at was that the jobs at risk are not spread equally across our population in Alameda County. So 63% of those vulnerable jobs are held by people that make less than $40,000 per year. And that bottom category, less than $25,000 per year, 60% of those jobs are vulnerable. Next slide, please. And then across population groups, we know that the Latina population has a larger share of that vulnerable job bucket, as well as people without bachelor's degrees being 70% of those vulnerable job holders. And then last slide, I think. And then to kind of touch on where we're going next, and Dr. Lar will talk about kind of the small business outlook for the city, but going into this crisis, not all small businesses were growing. The city did a small business survey of about 1,100 businesses between March and early May, and asked the question, were your gross receipts growing even before this crisis? And here the yellow bars are companies that responded that they were not growing. So more than 50% of the restaurant industry, more than 50% of small retail. So just wanted to point out that there were pressures heading into the crisis here. And these are the exact businesses that Michael was talking about, the ones in A, B, C, and D that may already be out of business or struggling to come out of this crisis. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Darcel Lar here, my research partner, and she can dig a little bit deeper on some of the equity concerns.
Professor Lar, are you unmuted? Let me see if we can. Professor Lar, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Great. So I'm both on the computer and the phone because I keep dropping off. So let's see how far we get. Next slide, please. So again, thank you, Jeff. As Jeff's reports demonstrate, we are clearly seeing disproportionate economic impacts in our communities of color in Oakland from this latest crisis. So really our ultimate goal here is to develop a game plan to try to address this existing crisis while laying the groundwork for our economy to thrive post-crisis. So one root cause of these disproportionate economic impacts is the deep, persistent wealth gap in communities of color, and frankly, the white-black wealth gap in particular. This wealth gap also clearly drives inequities in health and education and housing and nutrition in our communities. And these are compounded, and these compounded inequities are magnified during times of community trauma, just as we're seeing right now in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide, please. Now, we have well-documented evidence that employment, and specifically business ownership, can create new economic opportunities to address many of these wealth disparities in Black and brown communities. We also know that three of the major challenges for these small disadvantaged businesses to try to prosper in communities of color, first of all, a lack of access to growth capital, a lack of access to leadership education, and a lack of access to market. Next slide, please. Now, one prevalent approach to addressing at least the issue of lack of access to market for disadvantaged businesses is, of course, a focus on supplier diversity, where we look for very large businesses to increase their contracting opportunities with much smaller, diverse businesses, so that those much smaller businesses can become very large employers themselves over time. And the expectation is that the large businesses of color then located in communities of color will hire predominantly people of color from those very communities. But one of the studies that we recently concluded was that this can be, and we did some very deep listening to folks in the community about this idea of market access, and we found that this can be an insurmountable challenge for very small businesses, particularly businesses of color. Next slide, please. What we found was businesses are facing a great deal of apathy and resistance from some of the larger companies that really are concerned about these businesses having a perceived lack of knowledge and the associated deep learning curve that these businesses of color would have to climb in order to be viewed as qualified, suitable suppliers to these large businesses. We also saw frequent instances of, frankly, misalignment within the hiring companies between the supplier diversity proponents and the actual purchasing managers in the company. So these findings dovetailed with another small series of listening sessions that we held with manufacturers and makers in Oakland, where we very intentionally centered small, women-owned, and businesses of color in East Oakland. Next slide, please. We saw these very same issues manifest in varying ways. But one additional theme that we are seeing repeatedly emerging in these discussions, for Black businesses in particular, is a gap in trust, a lack of trust regarding local government, regarding technical assistance providers, regarding capital, regarding institutions, initiatives, policies, because of historical and present and pervasive discrimination and a lack of cultural sensitivity and competency. So these findings led us to think more carefully about the dynamics and the business strategies and the needs specifically for Black and brown businesses, small businesses, micro businesses in Oakland. So we know, next slide please. First of all, our goal is to address the enormous wealth gap in Oakland in order to address the disproportionate impacts of this latest community upheaval in COVID-19 and the underlying economic disparities in the city of Oakland. And secondly, we know job creation, employment, particularly through business ownership, is one of the major contributors to economic vibrancy in communities of color. And in fact, in Black communities in particular, one important route to addressing these kinds of disparities, this persistent wealth gap, is through business ownership. That then leads directly to improvements in housing and health and other community disparities. But the supplier diversity measures that we're seeing gaining a great deal of attention are actually not fully meeting the business expansion expectations in communities of color. And again, soundly underlying all of this are the enormous historical, institutional, and systemic obstacles that small Black and brown businesses face. Next slide, please. But what we're newly finding is that rather than trying to need to grow exponentially larger in order to maximize job creation, for Black-owned businesses, there's data that suggests that if just a small percentage of existing small Black-owned sole proprietors are able to hire one employee And if existing small Black-owned employer businesses are able to hire just 2 more people on average, Black businesses could reduce the rate of unemployment and move toward economic parity with other dominant communities. So our interest now is understanding whether or not this dynamic holds, and if so, how we can help our multitude of Black micro businesses generate sufficient revenue or reduce their costs of operation sufficiently to allow incremental hiring rather than relying on exponential growth for just a few Black businesses as really the primary sources for Black employment. So an interesting additional lens through which we want to view how we can transform the landscape of businesses of color here in Oakland is this idea of really helping those micro businesses of color to hire a little bit. So I'll leave this, though, with the reminder that any path that we choose has to address as well, fundamentally, the historical and persistent structural and systemic and institutional biases that really underpin the widening racial wealth inequalities in our communities of color. All right, thank you. I'll pass it back on now to Micah.
Thank you so much, Darcel. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody who's presented. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go very quickly through the working group structure and the schedule of meetings, and then hand it over to Marissa to talk a little bit more about these working groups. The truth is that this is actually not the Zoom in which it happens. You can't do that much on a 70-person Zoom call. So the majority of the work of this council is really going to be done in the working groups that will be elevating short-term and longer-term recommendations across a range of different areas, meeting on a frequent basis. But then I actually want to emphasize, look, we'll be producing recommendations that will be evaluated by different folks in the public sector and the private sector. But a lot of the sort of magic of this work is going to be the real-time responsiveness of these different groups to help businesses and individuals in Oakland not just be able to reopen, not just be able to go back to work, but really to create a more vibrant and equitable community here in Oakland, one that works for businesses, one that works for their employees, one that works for the broader community. So these working groups are going to be meeting on a regular basis. We're going to be asking each working group to meet at least once before our meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And then you're going to keep meeting, but then we do hope that we'll be creating email lists and other opportunities for sort of real-time feedback. There was a great example out of San Francisco from several restaurateurs saying, look, we can't actually reopen at half capacity. That doesn't work for our business model. So how can we expand into the streets? And I know there's a lot that the city staff has been doing already that you'll hear about in a little bit. And then ultimately, all of this work will result in an advisory council report with some top line recommendations. But I just want to keep emphasizing that this isn't a group that's going to deliberate for 6 months and then produce something, and that's the ultimate outcome. This is a group that has already been doing a lot of this work and is going to be continuing to do the work on an ongoing basis. And so we have the group of conveners that you heard about. If you volunteer to be the head of a work group, I want folks to understand this is not a symbolic position. You will be then coordinating with the conveners to help on an ongoing basis to produce these recommendations for the ongoing reopening and hopefully creating a more vibrant community. So next slide, please. So these are the meetings of the full groups. Again, we're asking the working groups to meet at least once between each of these meetings. And then the heads of those working groups and the heads of the conveners will also be meeting in their role as sort of a coordinating council to make sure that we are filtering in all the recommendations from the working groups and also from the broader community. It was mentioned earlier, you know, you folks are here as community leaders and are going to be helping to get input from a lot of folks on the ground and in your sectors and in your neighborhoods to make sure that we're really doing this in the right way. So I, at this point, would like to turn it over to Marissa, who's going to walk you through a little bit more some of what the state has been, the city has been doing, and to lead a discussion about the working groups. Marissa.
Thank you, Micah. Right before, and next slide, please. Before I get to go to the exciting part of moderating discussion, I just wanted to let you know really quickly what the city has been up to over the last couple of months. Because these are things that they're not adequate to meet every need, but we want to, we might want to expand on them or scale them or add additional efforts. And so this is program infrastructure that we have built so far. We have put out, thanks to Kelly Kahn and the mayor's office for standing up and fundraising very quickly, $1 million micro grant fund for small businesses. Those were $5,000 grants, thank you. That went to 180 businesses thus far. We have 5 times that request for assistance, but we were really able to target those to very low income business owners, 80% of whom were people of color. We've also done over 1,000 calls to small businesses who took our intake survey. That's where we've got a rich data source on how businesses are doing and where they're at, who they've laid off. We did an additional outreach with help from other advisory council members who are here. Thanks CJ and Jessica Chen from the Chinatown Chamber, the Latino Chamber. We reached out to 500 businesses who hadn't contacted us, looking at who was least likely to contact us for issues of trust and access to resources and disparities, and did that outreach in Cantonese, Spanish, and English. As most of these assistance applications that we're helping direct people to, PPP, economic injury, pandemic unemployment, were all English only applications with the exception of unemployment. And we had a small grant go out for undocumented vendors who are ineligible. Next slide, please. Our council did an eviction moratorium that expires at the end of this month, and also converted our BRT Business Assistance Fund to a Coronavirus Recovery Assistance Fund. And we have an Oakland Relief Fund that has funded a number of different efforts with frontline nonprofits. And you will hear about it tomorrow, but you're getting a sneak preview today. We're just about to launch an East Bay Artists Fund.
Marissa, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I believe that the council has a proposal they're voting on tomorrow that would extend the eviction moratorium. I just don't want people to see it expires May 31st. It will probably expire when the state emergency expires, correct?
I don't.
Yeah, that's right, Mayor. Thank you for raising that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Alexa. That was an excellent and needed interruption. Next slide, please. These are some things we're currently exploring. I want to thank Advisory Council Member Ari Tecate Vasquez for elevating the idea of Summer Streets Initiative early on, where we can make some of our public right-of-way available for outdoor seating over the summertime. Revolving loan fund and a second micro grant pilot that would use a mutuality platform to allow community co-investment and be paired with a crowd-funded loan. So just, the things that we have done in the last 2 months, what we've been up to, and the programs that we've built to try to figure out who hasn't gotten, how can we get more people to the stimulus resources, and how can we help those for whom that's going to be woefully inadequate. Next slide, please. So for our working groups, what we're hoping, you have so much terrific background and perspective amongst you. We wanted to give you the opportunity to self-select into working groups around the phases of California's reopening, with 4 working groups built around businesses and the 5th around healthy workforce. So the phase 1 businesses are the ones that are already open. Our healthcare sector, which is far and away Oakland's largest employer and biggest industry, our grocery stores and other essential businesses that are currently open, but not without hiccups and challenges and need for additional safety measures. Our phase 2 businesses that we're excited are slowly reopening now are retail, manufacturing, offices, and eventually restaurants. The phase 3 businesses, these for me are the ones that first told me that in my outreach that they were thinking about closing the gyms, spas, salons, health centers, businesses where people have to touch each other or touch shared equipment, and where the state had not released a very clear reopening timeline, and the rent issue was just too much for them to continue operating under. So they would have their own working group. Phase 4, which I've gotten a lot of great feedback on just over this call, sporting events, concerts, live performances, the things where we all gather together in larger groups, and we know those are going to be the last to come back. And finally, we wanted to have one work group that's just dedicated to worker safety, worker disparities, and hiring and retraining. All of those groups, even though they're phased over time, we're going to ask you to think about immediate steps. And even though we're focusing on immediate steps, we're still interested in what the mayor and others have put forward as our goal for this group, which is how do we have an equitable long-term recovery, and how do we lay the groundwork for that now? So my question for you to kick off the discussion, and thanks Andreas for kicking it off in the chat, is where do you see yourself in one of these working groups, and what's missing? And where would the topics that you want to bring to the advisory council potentially belong? We're going to take that feedback, potentially alter these proposed working groups, and then do a follow-up survey to you probably tonight or tomorrow morning, asking you to self-select a group and let us know your availability for a pre-meeting before our next advisory council session.
Yeah, thanks, Marissa. This is Alexa, and I see a lot of great questions coming up in the chat, which is exactly what we want. We want feedback to firm up these working groups. But before that, I just wanted to do a time check. We are at almost 4:40, and we were hoping to have an additional discussion, and then we wanted to hear from Michael from Policy Link. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up. If it's all right with folks on this call, we might go ahead and go until 5 p.m. So if not, we will be, if you can't stay on for the full meeting, we will be recording it. So you will be welcome to watch it afterwards. Okay, thanks. Back to you, Marissa.
Thank you. And can you raise your hand if you want to speak? And
for those of you that don't know how to raise your hand, if you go to the participant screen on the bottom of your screen and you look at the 3 little dots all the way to the right, you should be able to see a button there to raise your hand.
And Alexa and Rebecca, I'm trying to unmute people on participants, but I'm not.
Oh,
there we go.
Okay. Can you do it?
Yeah, I just unmuted Saru.
Can you hear me?
Yep, thank you.
You want me to go first, or it seemed like other people had questions first? I don't want to cut.
You were the first who requested to speak.
Okay, and sorry I show up as Vince Steele. I have to rename this. Thank you for all of this. Really appreciate it. I did feel like there was a missing piece of the presentations, which was really from a labor or workforce angle. You know, we heard a lot. I think we heard some great macro data in terms of small businesses and equity, especially with regard to small businesses, but there are equity issues with regard to workers as well, and the large numbers of unemployed, and also workers' rights issues, which we didn't get as much of today. So it'd be great if, I know we're breaking up now from here on out, but it would be great if there's another opportunity to let somebody from the labor or workforce world also share with the whole group around some of the broader worker issues that are happening and some of the inequities. The other thing I just did want to raise is, some of you may know, I work a lot in the restaurant sector, and we've been working with the governor and now hopefully with Oakland too on a great program that it's called High Road Kitchens, and it does multiple things at once. It provides public and private dollars to
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To grant restaurants that commit to equity principles, higher wages, greater equity next year, to get funds to rehire workers and repurpose themselves as community kitchens. And I just raised that because what we did there is we were able to think about workers' needs and the need to really increase equity among the workforce in the restaurant industry together, and the need for food together with the need to save small businesses. And my concern with separating out in this way, where you've got different sectors and then the working group, is that there isn't then the opportunity to come up with these really creative solutions that really do address simultaneously small business needs and worker needs at the same time. And that's what we've been able to do. I mean, another example is that we're talking at the state level about the potential for unemployed worker cooperatives. And I don't know where that would go in this, or the conversions to worker cooperatives. And I don't know where that would go. So I'm concerned about separating out the worker piece as something separate from all the other sectors, that it won't allow for this great cross-pollination of ways in which creative ideas can emerge. And I also am hoping that there will be a chance to present on worker issues.
Thank you. Thanks. That's great feedback. Cynthia Harris, I'm going to try to unmute you next.
Because my hand,
Yes, go ahead, Cynthia.
I'm sorry, I accidentally raised my hand.
Oh, okay, great. I have the next person in the queue as a number 573179. I'm going to unmute you and speak up and let us know who you are. All right, you'll have to chat and come back to me. Ari, go ahead, please. Ari Takata Vasquez.
Hi. So I guess sort of echoing what was just said is I do wonder if this sort of organization by sector is going to be as efficient, because a lot of the things that we're concerned about as small business, some fitting into essential workers, some, phase one, some fitting into phase two, we're all very concerned about the same issues as far as like leasing goes, which Michael did a great job of highlighting.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if we're maybe all working on the same problems in separate groups. So I think that would be a concern for me. And I think also maybe is what's missing from that is talking about overall consumer confidence across those groups, because it's not, it's not as if, folks go just to a retail shop and that's it. They don't just go to a restaurant. These things are all pretty interconnected. And so, with things like consumer streets, that we might have some redundancies. So I'm just wondering if maybe there's a better way to divvy out our groups.
Okay, I'm just gonna give a minute to Kate O'Hara, and then I have Lynn, Julina, and Carolyn in the queue.
Thanks, and thanks for all of this great information. I just want to second Saru's comment about having some presentation and data around how workers are faring in this, so that we can really be aware of what's happening in the different sectors. I think the information that different sectors are going to fare differently through this is really important for us to key in on, in terms of where there may be businesses that can grow and where there is not. And we know, like in the hospitality industry, it's like 90-95% unemployment, and that's a big industry for the city of Oakland, and for the workers that work in that industry. So getting some data on that. I also want to make sure folks here know that the city of Oakland, the council did pass last week an emergency paid sick day policy that builds on what the federal requirements are to require and ensure that all workers have 80 hours of immediate paid sick day to be able to, quarantine if necessary, take care of their family, etc. So it would also be great to hear what the city of Oakland is doing to get the word out among workers and businesses around both that law and the existing paid sick day law that Oakland has. Because, the reality is, we know for a lot of low wage workers, the majority of whom are people of color in Oakland, they were struggling before the COVID. And so with this in place now, it's even harder to make rent, make ends meet, et cetera. So it'd be really good to bring those perspectives in, and to also think about if there's other organizations working with different communities of workers that could be a part of these work groups to help to bring those worker perspectives into the conversations around these different sectors.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Lynn?
There we go. Yeah. This goes in part to Ari's point. There are, it seems like there are commonalities with the size of employers that might cut across industries. So the smaller employers within multiple industries may be facing very similar issues versus just industry verticals. And there may be some division between businesses that kind of the high touch businesses, the restaurants, the hair care, nail salon, places where people have very close contact, and small businesses where they don't. But I think that lumping all the businesses in some industries together where there can be a vast difference between, you know, the business that has 10 employees in that industry and the business that has 10,000 employees, maybe we should have something in there on size so that we can support, make sure to support particularly some of these micro and small businesses.
Thank you, Lynn. I have Julina, CJ, Kat, and Liz, and if you could each do just a minute, I think that would keep us on time. Thanks for these great ideas.
Hey, Marissa and everyone else. Thank you. This is Julina Bonilla with the Port of Oakland. And so thank you for such a comprehensive overview of the strategy moving forward. But I do want to bring to our attention that we do have two jobs policies, one that was adopted by the City of Oakland and one that was adopted by the Port of Oakland relative to the seaport and logistics complex on the port side and the Oakland Global Logistics Center on the city side. And as we start thinking about what the intent of that jobs policy was around local hire, around meeting the mandates of our most vulnerable population, and thinking about the scale of economy that was going to bring to our area, I'm just also thinking about where that falls into the discussions that we're having now. And I'm not exactly sure in terms of how the breakouts were taking place. And I do have to put in a little disclosure. I had to step away for a few seconds. So if it's in there somewhere, please bring me back. But I just wanted to put it out there for thought as we are continuing and developing these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. CJ from Black Cultural Zone.
Hi, thank you. I just had two thoughts. One was around the linkages between all of the different work groups. I'm wondering if the data support and or the city staff will be able to create that linkage in between meetings. And then the second was, you know, I loved Michael Bush's presentation. He's always brilliant. And I just am very concerned that the A and B businesses will be primarily Black and brown businesses. And I want to figure out a way to give them some sort of a softer landing if possible, while still offering the C and D groups this amazing potential sort of reduction in rent for a year. So just wanted to put that out.
Yes, I hear you on that. And yeah, we will create a committee for the leaders of each work group who will have support from staff or one of the co-facilitators. And we'll meet, and at our next council meeting, each work group will be presenting out from their own recommendations. So there will be continuity between the groups to hear from each other. Kat, you are next, followed by Liz Ortega. Hello, Kat.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to make an appeal to have community banks, loan funds, and other sources of credit involved either as a through line or a separate group, particularly those of us who are regulated. And I also just wonder, we're trying to work on testing and credentialing in a way that doesn't increase privilege in the system in terms of who gets to go back to work first and who gets to engage in all societal activities first. Thank you.
Thank you. And Liz Ortega?
Hi, thanks for calling on me. I'm Liz Ortega with the Alameda Labor Council, representing 135,000 members in Alameda County. This is a great group. I'm honored to be part of the discussion today. And going off of what Saru mentioned a little bit ago, in terms of workers and the worker perspective, you know, I represent 135,000 workers in Alameda County, all of them in two parts right now. Some of them in the entertainment and transportation and education who are struggling or not home or not working, and then those who are deemed essential and are struggling with access to, you know, keeping them safe and secure. So from labor's perspective, I just, you know, as we look at the different sectors and how we break ourselves out, I just wanted to make it public that I'll be looking to work at making sure that frontline workers are safe, they're keeping workers employed, and protecting them and making sure they have a place to go back to when the economy reopens. As well as one thing we didn't talk about is just keeping the state and local government solvent, right? We saw the economic breakdown and the unprecedented times that we're in. We want to make sure we're working in partnership to get those federal resources. And then lastly, just assuring healthcare for all. Again, if we want to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the Latino and African American community, one thing that has always bridged that gap is having a union and a union contract so that workers have access to healthcare and decent wages and retirement. So I'll be working in, you know, as we look at those different sectors, that's how we'll be making the decision. Obviously, they kind of fit into all, but really proud to be part of this discussion.
Thank you, Liz. Ali, can you unmute yourself? You requested to speak, but I don't see your hand. There we go. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having this group. It was really great. Thanks, Mayor. Vice Mayor, thank you so much. I just wanted to, I just don't want to jump into about reopening the economy, reopening the businesses. As a business owner, of course, I wanted to introduce myself first. I'm Ali Obad. I'm the owner of ShopRite Supermarket in East Oakland, District 6, Lauren Taylor. And I'm also the president of the Bay Area Small Merchants Chamber of Commerce. As I see it, I'm on the field myself at a supermarket. I own my own supermarket. Probably most of everybody knows it in East Oakland, on General in Oakland. As I see it, as everybody's talking about the African American, how they are so vulnerable to this coronavirus. I think before we thinking, of course, this is another, I'm just moving out to educate. We have to educate the people first. As Lauren Taylor, the city council member, District 6, he knows in the city and the office of the mayor, they were here 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, where I was passing out a lot of water, a lot of things for the community. We were passing out face masks, we were passing out sanitizers. So I think we need to educate the people. We need the city officials to come out, to be on the news, we have to educate the people before we start thinking of opening up the businesses, because the coronavirus is still out there. And as you guys can see in New York, how New York is really just devastated. Everywhere else, Los Angeles, everywhere. If the coronavirus ended up hitting us in Oakland, thank God that it haven't hit us, so bad. Just in the county. But if it hits the vulnerable, like the East Oakland area, then we would be really devastated in Oakland. We wouldn't be thinking about reopening the economy now. We would be thinking of how to solve the issue, how to take care of the sick people, and
Right.
So I think we ought to try to educate, or bring out so much education to the people to wear the face mask, to have the 6 feet separation, to do these things, because I see it myself. I see it at the store myself, in the supermarket, and people intend not to take it so seriously. They're not taking the coronavirus very serious.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Ali. That's a wonderful point. I'm going to let Barb have the last word, and then go to Michael McAfee to wrap us up. And I think we'll, as facilitators, take your input on the working groups and send something out shortly for you to choose into. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. And it is lovely to see everybody, as Jose mentioned earlier today. Getting back to a couple comments of folks earlier, I don't want to lose sight of the importance, I think, of the sector strategy. I think it nests really nicely with what our governor is already talking about in phasing 1 through 4, as well as what's happening with the county health officers. But I do think there's a way to also be cognizant, and we've talked about this on the call, on the planning calls prior, on sort of a geographic slice and the importance of looking at different geographies in Oakland. Particularly, one of the reasons I think it's important that our bids are represented here by Savlon, and really talking about their small businesses and capturing a variety of businesses, but in a geographic region. So I don't think it's an either or, I think it's a both and. We just have to be cognizant that it's going to be kind of messy a little bit going forward, but we want to make sure we don't sort of have an unintended consequence of not including a particular business and or neighborhood. I also want to, particularly I think it's important when we're talking about the workforce development aspect of our future, because a lot of our funding and the workforce development efforts of the city and the region and the state are geared towards that sector strategy. So I think it's important to sort of align with that. And we are having at the chamber to support this effort, a series of conversations by industry later this week and early next week that we hope that anybody on this call wants to hop on and provide information so that we can then just provide additional content to our future discussions. So thank you, Marissa. And thank you guys, particularly staff. I know how much Alexa's been doing to pull this all together, and I really appreciate your efforts. I know it's been huge.
Michael McAfee, are you available?
Yeah.
To wrap us up?
Yeah. Mayor, thank you for pulling us together. It's been a pleasure to listen to what everyone has said. I've really been, this meeting gives me hope. Jose said something at the beginning about the power of the relationships here, and I truly do believe that, because if we're going to have an opportunity to reimagine a different economy, it's going to start with our relationships. The ability for us to be able to have tough conversations, to suspend some of our own self-interest for a greater good. This is our currency right now, the power of these relationships. If we can't do this, it isn't going to happen. And so I heard a couple of themes that I'll just share, and then I'll just close out of respect for your time. One was about, I think Ali mentioned this, about staying in the present and dealing with the existing pandemic and not losing sight of that, that is really important for us to do. And then there were other things that were getting us into the area that I think is really going to be powerful around radical imagination, the ability for landlords in the city and tenants to come together and ignite a different possibility around how we're going to get through this together. I think Michael laid out a beautiful way for us to think about strategies that would allow some relief to folks while still making landlords whole, and we should consider that. Saru came on and I think gave us, really the call to action that I think is really at the nexus of what equity is all about. This ability for us to be able to hold workers and businesses in the same relationship and to figure out a path forward that works for everyone. That is what equity is about, just and fair inclusion into a society in which everyone can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. That is the wicked problem of this nation. And if there's any one place that can figure it out, it is Oakland. So I want to leave you with that call to action, that as we go forward on these committees, that we be committed to working, that we be committed to working for the greater good, and that we think about doing what folks have resisted or have designed a system to not do, which is to actually be able to hold what do workers need and what do businesses need. That is the reimagining economy that will work for everyone. So just wanted to leave you with that. Honored to be on this call with you. Honored to be on this journey towards recovery with you.
Great. Thanks, Michael. That's a wonderful call to action. And action will be requested of all of you. You'll be getting a survey here. I won't promise tonight, sometime very soon, to build on your feedback about the working groups. And then we can iterate going forward. I mean, if there are crucial issues that emerge, we can create working groups around it. This is not intended to be like sort of a rigid structure. This is intended to be responsive. This is intended to be, you know, a group that is providing feedback on an ongoing basis as we deal with the immediate needs of the businesses and the people of Oakland, but also as we think about reimagining the economy. So lots of work to come. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. And thank you so much to Marissa and everybody else, and Alexa for putting this together. And thank you, Madam Mayor, for kicking us off. And looking forward to seeing everybody on Zooms and then hopefully in person at some point soon. That would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be hearing from us, folks, and thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Micah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. This is Alexa, and I just saw a question in the chat. It says, who's going to decide who goes in what groups? So we are going to be following up with all of you, so please stay tuned. There will be an email and a survey, and that is how the groups will be assigned. So thank you. Stay tuned. There's more to come. Thank you
Be
so
safe,
much.
everyone.
Thank you. Take
Thanks.
care.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.